Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our first ever virtual Rally Day briefing. This session has already proved to be unique, so a virtual Rally Day seems appropriate, although we will have our in-person one, which Don will tell you about. The other panelists joining us today are Governor Greg Abbott, State Senator Bryan Hughes from District 1, Don Allen, Government Relations Committee Chair, and Scott Norman, of course, our Executive Director of TAB. I want to thank our sponsors. You'll hear more about them later in the program, but we are always appreciative of our sponsors, or we could not do all that we do to get education and information to our members. As the voice of the residential building industry and our roughly 10,000 builder, remodeler, developer, and associated trade members from across the state, we are committed to addressing the housing needs of the people of Texas. We represent over 723,000 jobs and more than 67.5 billion annually to the Texas economy. TAB and our local associations play a crucial role in providing affordable housing for Texans. Finally, it's important to note that 2021 is the 75th anniversary of TAB. Since 1946, Texas Association of Builders has engaged in furthering the business of Texas housing industry and advocating for current and future homeowners of the great state of Texas. Advocacy on the local, state, and national levels is so important to keeping housing affordable. We need members to be active. We need them to participate. We need them to be educated on what is happening. And we need them to help make sure that our voice is being heard. Now we will have a message from Governor Abbott.
Hi, this is Governor Greg Abbott. Thank you to the Texas Association of Builders and to all of your members for your tireless work to meet Texas's housing needs. And congratulations on 75 years of advocacy for the housing industry. Your efforts are critical to ensuring the economic vitality of the Lone Star State. Now, despite the challenges of COVID, housing demand has continued to grow as Texas remains the economic engine of America. To keep the Texas economy growing, we must continue to advance strategies to build a more prosperous future for both your industry as well as for all Texans. And that's why this session, we are working to cut costly regulations, enhance workforce development, and to provide civil liability protections for businesses and workers who opened and operated safely during the course of the pandemic. I encourage all of you to remain engaged this session on these very important issues that are facing our state. And together, we will keep Texas the best state to live, to work, and to raise a family.
We now have a message from Ferguson.
Now more than ever, it's important for you and your family to enjoy the spaces you're in most often. Count on the experts at Ferguson Bath, Kitchen, and Lighting Gallery to help you make the most of home and create a space you'll love to live in together. Shop online or schedule a personalized consultation to discover stunning products from the comfort of your own home.
And I'll now turn it over to Don Allen, who of course is our Government Relations Committee Chair. Don?
Thank you, Susan. There are a lot of different ways that TAB members can contribute to our advocacy efforts. Among some of the most important ones are to attend our TAB meetings. Every member of every association is invited to and encouraged to attend our TAB meetings. And at each of our TAB meetings, and then periodically in between, generally about 4 times a year, the GRC, the Government Relations Committee, will meet and determine our legislative priorities. If you haven't been to one of our meetings, it's a large committee and we have a large audience of members that attend this. It's very informative. There's lots of healthy discussion in the meetings about the impact of various potential legislation on our business. Lots of good back and forth. You learn a lot. And it's great to hear, and we're welcoming all of our members to speak up on these issues if you have something to contribute as we discuss any potential legislation or anything else that impacts us rules and regulation wise. Secondly, sign up for Voter Voice. That's a tool we use to communicate with you throughout the year about issues and events and other important information that pertains to the state legislature and your elected officials. To sign up for Voter Voice, you go to texasbuilders.org, our website, click on the Government Affairs tab, and then click on Advocacy and Action. On that page, there's a box. You can enter your email and your zip code. And when we're doing so, please use your home zip code and your home address, because what we do then is that then records who your local state legislator and state senator is. And so we can send you specific information about your particular elected officials after you sign up through Voter Voice. Another big deal is to participate in Rally Day. And that's one of the things we're here to talk about today. Rally Day, if you haven't been, it's a load of fun. It's very informative. While the TAB government relations team is working around the clock, all the session on our behalf, our staff and our lobbyists, attending Rally Day gives you an opportunity to meet our legislators, your legislators, face to face. And honestly, you may be surprised. I mean, if you've never sat in the office of a legislator or state senator, at how interested most of them are going to be to talk to you and to hear from you and hear your opinions and hear what impacts our industry and hear what we need from our representatives in Austin. It can be very enlightening and very interesting. And once you do it, I think everybody that's done it once wants to come back and do it again. Lastly, anytime there's a state elected official that's going to be at a TAB event in your area or one of your local HBA events, it's important that we have a strong attendance. We have a lot of members there so that they understand that, we have a lot of voters, we have a lot of contributors, and it shows them the scope and breadth of our industry, and it gives you an opportunity again to hear firsthand from the decision makers that affect our everyday lives. Talk to them, engage them, offer support. And I guess the other part of this is when you have local events, invite your local representatives. You'd be surprised how many times they'd love to come out and attend some social event and meet our members. So those are just a few of the many ways that you can participate in advocacy at your local level and be very effective. Now, we'd like to offer a message from our next sponsor, the Great American Insurance Group.
Good afternoon. Great American Insurance Group is proud to be a presenting sponsor for today's 2021 Rally Day Briefing virtual meeting and this year's legislative session. I'm Julie Tomlinson, Divisional Assistant Vice President and Head of our Residential Construction U.S. and Canadian Underwriting Operations. Rally Day is a fantastic opportunity for you to have a positive impact on the legislative challenges affecting residential construction. By attending and participating in TAB's Rally Day, and throughout this legislative process, our collective voice can serve as the strongest representation of the Texas residential construction, remodeling, and development industry. We appreciate your attendance, and on behalf of Great American Insurance Group, thank you for all the great that you do.
All right, and with that, now Scott Norman will shed some light on the legislative session and the themes that we're expecting to see. Scott?
Thank you, Don. I appreciate the intro there, and all that you and Susan Wright do. As an industry that's been going for 75 years, as was pointed out, dating back to that first legislative session after TAB got started in 1947, we have been advocating on behalf of our members. And it's funny looking back as we are going through this year in Texas Builders and others, publications, looking back at our 75 years, a lot of the issues that we were engaged in 1947 are still present today. One of the issues that was on the table back in 1947 had to do with the licensing of plumbers and the state plumbing board. And it's ironic that that issue is still front and center. It was obviously last session, and now with the winter storm, it's certainly in play. And the plumbing shortage is still very much in the minds of citizens all over the state and our industry. But this session, we knew going in was going to be very different, unlike any, at least in the last 100 years, because of the pandemic, dating back to the Spanish flu pandemic. And the session in 1919 was the last time a legislative session was held in these situations. And it is certainly not disappointed. Access has been a challenge. Obviously, we were having this event virtually, and we were having to change the way we do business, advocate on your behalf because of the limited access and the different ways that we're having to communicate to the Capitol. Even this meeting that was scheduled a couple of weeks ago got pushed off because of the unforeseen fallout from the winter storm, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But the way we engage and the way that we work as an industry, all of us collectively as a voice of the residential housing industry, is not going to change. At least the results aren't going to change. The way we get things done are a little different. As we seen, we've had to move our rally day that was going to be a few weeks ago, was gotten moved to April. And but we are still hoping to have meetings. Now, those meetings may not be at the Capitol. They may be over at the hotel. But I know we're working with our local home builders associations to work on those and set up those meetings so you can meet with your legislators. It's very important, as Don and Susan pointed out, that you are engaged and that you participate in the process. Because the legislators need to hear from the experts in whatever the field is. We are a citizen legislature, and they are not experts on housing development and housing construction necessarily, and all the work that our members do to provide housing for this great state. And so it's important that we continue to be engaged in the ways that we can. So we talked about COVID-19, major issue, obviously the fallout. There's a lot of debate, and we're going to talk to Senator Hughes here in just a minute about how that's affecting the process. Another thing that was on the horizon for this session, or was on the agenda, is redistricting. Every 10 years following the census, the national census, the states have to redraw their House and Senate legislative maps as well as the U.S. congressional maps. Texas is going to be in the fortunate situation to get 3 or 4 additional congressional seats because of the continued population growth that our state is seeing. And that is something the legislature is going to have to take up. Now, it looks like they're not going to have the numbers from the Census Bureau during this session to get it done. So it sounds like that they're going to be coming back in a special session, maybe next fall, to do redistricting. Also, the budget. That's the one constitutional item the legislature has to accomplish every session, is to pass a balanced budget, and they are here until they get that done. And so thankfully, the budget situation is not near as bad as we thought early on in the pandemic a year ago it was going to be. But it is, with federal stimulus funds coming down and other, the economy outperforming some of the dire predictions that were there, the budget issue may not be as bad. But what has thrown all of this into disarray was the winter storm a couple of weeks ago. That has really taken what little remaining oxygen was left in the session out of the room, as all or most of the legislators from all over the state's constituents, with very few exceptions, were drastically affected by the severe power outages and resulting damage and water supply issues and other things that are occurring because of that. There were 2 days of hearings in the House and Senate last week. There's already been board members that have resigned. There's been executives that have been fired from ERCOT. And as you can imagine, there's quite a reckoning that is to be had as a result of an event that affected constituents and citizens all over the state. Obviously, it affects our issues as the homes and businesses that were damaged. The material shortages that we were already facing are only aggravated now that the rebuilding that's going to have to occur from the damaged structures. And so that is calculating and factoring into to the issues that we are working on. I'm going to get, after Senator Hughes and I have a conversation here in a second, we're going to get into some of the specifics of the issues that we're working on. And I also want to invite you, as Don and Susan had, to make sure you do come to Rally Day, get engaged. We'll be providing materials to your local home builders associations about the issues and the direct legislation that we are supporting. We are looking at about next week is the bill filing deadline. And that is when the legislature, after the 60th day, can no longer file bills. So we will have a good lay of the land, if you will, of the legislative environment that we're operating in when we come to town, or when all of you come to town in April. But we're not going to wait to April to get engaged, though. It's important as your lobbyist, your lobby team and advocacy and leadership is engaging at the Capitol, but it's important that you engage as well as calls to action come out through our voter voice system and other means of communication. It's imperative that you do respond. Let's get a message from our next sponsor, James Hardie Building Products.
Hello and happy Rally Day 2021. My name is James Watson. I'm the Director of Sales for James Hardie Building Products here in Dallas, Texas. We are honored to sponsor Rally Day this year and support all of our friends and family in the home building industry as we continue down the path forward that our industry drives in the state. With over 500 employees between our Cleburne and Waxahachie facilities, the partnership that we have with the Texas Association of Builders and all of its members, it's more than just business to us. It's how we take care of our families. And for that partnership, we're truly grateful. Our industry is a symbol of strength and fortitude, and James Hardie is blessed and honored to be a part of it.
Thank you for that. Can't thank our sponsors enough. And they allow us to not only bring you this, but to bring our Rally Day activities that will be happening next month here in Austin. So it's very important what our sponsors do, and we thank you for that. One of the things that someone was reminding me is to make sure you get signed up for Voter Voice. We're going to post that, I believe, in the chat. And there is a link on how to do that. If you're not signed up for Voter Voice, as Don pointed out, that is the online messaging software that we use to deliver calls to action and advocacy engagements. So it looks like now our guest, Senator Bryan Hughes, is joining us. So I'll let him log in, and then we'll go on to our Q&A. There he is. Hello, Senator.
Hey, man. How's it going, Scott?
It's going great. Thank you for joining us today. You are joining. We've got several hundred of our members from all over the state, including a good number up in Northeast Texas, our neck of the woods, who have joined us today. And we've been talking a little bit about engaging in the legislative session, but I'm glad you could join us. Let me introduce you first, everybody. We are fortunate today that Senator Bryan Hughes, who's it's hard to believe, but it's been in the legislature, I guess, over 20 years now, going back to his time in the House, and now he's in his second term in the state Senate. I mentioned Senate District 1, which is pretty much all of Northeast Texas, I think 16 counties or so. Grew up in the same area I did, and I'm proud to say he represents most of my kinfolk in Longview, Texas. He was born and raised in East Texas, went to TJC and the University of Texas at Tyler. Got his law degree from Baylor University as a practicing attorney, served in the House for 14 years. Is that right, Senator?
Yes, sir.
Before getting elected to the Senate, and has the enviable task of chairing the prestigious Senate State Affairs Committee. But like all good senators, they are on all kinds of committees. He's also, I think, on education, jurisprudence, natural resources, economic development, the nominations committee, and what I was just talking about a minute ago, the lovely redistricting committee. So you've got a handful this session. And so I guess let's just kick it off. First, how are you doing? And then this unforeseen issues session of COVID and now winter storm. I mean, I want to talk about all these, but how are you doing, Senator, and welcome.
Man, thanks so much, Scott. Doing great. And it's good to connect like this. You know, this is the next best thing, obviously, and normally get to course, see you here a lot and get to greet our folks who still live back home from the Tyler area, East Texas area, associations. And normally we get to visit and take pictures, but it's good to get to connect like this. And yeah, y'all know, my goodness, what a year. But thankful to be back home. I realize we're speaking to a mixed group, right? Folks over in Smith County, in ERCOT, that good old Texas power grid, had a real tough time. And then those of us in, Longview and areas outside the Texas power grid didn't have the same challenges. But man, obviously it's a statewide issue that we're all working on. And so we're just glad to be back. And thank you guys for including me on this. I know there's other places that each of your members could be and you guys can be. So thank y'all. Thank y'all for including me today.
Well, we're glad you're here, Senator. So obviously, we'll get into the storm here in a second, but we knew this session was going to be different because of COVID and the pandemic, and obviously the issues y'all are having to deal with, as well as the access challenges and the safety challenges that y'all have had to implement. How's it going so far as we're getting closer to this 60-day end? Do you feel like y'all are kind of getting your groove? I know it's been a slow start.
It has. And, the most striking difference has been the absence of folks here, for obvious reasons. Groups like our builders, when planning, we're not in a position to plan to come down here early in the session. And, normally we get to see a lot of folks from back home. And so that hasn't been going on. So the halls have been pretty quiet. That's unusual. But the good news is, committees are getting their work done. Bills are being filed, and the State Affairs Committee is having its first meeting on Monday. And if you look back in previous sessions, the first meeting would have been this week. So we're not terribly far behind. That different offices are taking different approaches, to the COVID-19 protocols. And that's fine. We respect that. Folks have to be careful. We are wearing masks. Senators wearing masks when we're on the Senate floor until we reach our desk. Our desks we sit 6 feet apart. So that the Lord worked that out for us. So, but then in individual offices, different folks do it different ways. Testing's available. You've seen, so you guys have done it. We've got these real pretty tents set up, and you get a free COVID test, and that's not required to come in the building, but it kind of gives people comfort knowing that folks there have been tested and we can relax a little bit. I had the Rona back in July. I don't know if I'm sure some of us on the call have had it, and hopefully with the vaccine, and we're going to be moving forward soon. I know we're ready to get back to normal. And so the session's going well. Thank you. Our founders wisely gave us this little 140-day window to pass bills, right? And y'all know what that means. It means that the system is designed more to kill bills than it is to pass bills. And that's okay. I wish all mine would pass, but for all the good bills that don't make it, there's a whole bunch of bad bills that don't make it. So it is going well. It feels like we're finally getting moving after the Corona stuff and then the storm. It feels like we're finally getting moving.
Yes,
we're going to get the important stuff done.
That's right. That's right. Well, I know one of the things y'all have to get a budget accomplished, and I know when this first started, we thought the state might be in a little worse budgetary position. It sounds like that's not going to be as big a challenge as maybe we thought.
Scott, that's right. My goodness, 6 months ago, it was looking pretty grim. Well, y'all remember, my goodness, of course, y'all know what happened to our economy, to this best economy any of us can remember, right? A year ago, we were enjoying, and then long about early March, how the world changed. But it's good to see Texas come back. As usual, Texas came back quicker than most, stronger than most. And we're not there. And again, y'all know better than anybody how we're doing. Of course, I've said this to you before, your industry is so important because you are both an indicator and a driver of the economy. And we're thankful. So yes, the budget picture looks a whole lot better than it did. In DC, when they need some more money or want some more money, I used to say they roll the presses. They don't, the Treasury people say it would be physically impossible to print all this money, but they just create money electronically. We can't do that. We have to balance the budget just like y'all have to. And so it's a good system, and it is looking a little better than it was a few months ago. So we're going to get the important stuff done. It's going to be tight, and that's probably good for us. It keeps us from frivolous spending or expanding programs too much, but the budget is going to be much better. We're not looking at draconian cuts to the budget.
Well, and that's great. We were obviously a year ago, almost exactly when this first hit, we, like every other business and families, wondered what the future was going to hold. Interestingly, the importance of housing, I think, has only been amplified because people were sheltering and going to school and working and doing everything, stay-at-home vacations, everything in their home. And that's been reflected in the demand for housing and remodeling and our multifamily builders and everyone in this state throughout the pandemic. And it was so important, and appreciate your help and working with the governor's office in getting our industry deemed essential, because as you and I have talked about, there were just dozens and dozens of local jurisdictions, cities and counties that were either severely restricting or in some cases even trying to shut down our industry. And I know the governor's made a lot of attention this week with his big announcement on reopening Texas 100% and the mask mandate. You feel like that we're in a good place as a state moving forward, that we're going to be able to continue to operate safely?
Man, I really do. Y'all seen the numbers, they continue to come down. And that mask thing, I know it's a complicated issue. And I will say, for my part, if I go to a store or to someone's home or to a building that want me to wear a mask, I'm going to put on the mask. I don't just love it, but I don't mind doing it out of respect for them. You know, it's kind of a hot political issue, right? Those, especially over the last couple of months, some of my friends some of those Republicans in the suburban areas, they were afraid of somebody catching them in a photograph without a mask and putting it on social media. I didn't want somebody taking my picture with a mask and putting it on social media, but we just try to, respect the business owners and let them make their own decisions. I think the governor's done the right thing as far as lifting that up. And it's encouraging to see things are getting better. I don't know how many of us have had the vaccine. I have not. I had the COVID-19 back in July, and I'm not in a hurry. We're going to make sure people who have more serious needs get it first. I'm not in a hurry to get that, but it does seem like we've turned the corner on this thing. So don't you feel that way? I mean,
I do, Senator, and the numbers are good on the amount of vaccine. It sounds like the state is getting more.
Yeah.
I know the governor or the Department of Health, Human Services added teachers and other school support personnel, the list of those that are eligible. So that may help with the back to school issues that have been going on. So that's encouraging. Redistricting, always a contentious issue. I mentioned you're on the redistricting committee. Before you got on, I was relaying that it sounds like y'all aren't going to have the numbers, and that may not happen during the regular session. Is that still something that's going to happen later, sounds like?
That's what they're saying. You know how that works. Of course, it's in the U.S. Constitution. We have to get that census every 10 years, and that's when we redraw those lines. And you're correct. We have to get those census final numbers from the feds, and it's probably not going to be till October. So we're not sure what that's going to look like. But as you know, there are 150 Texas House districts in the state and 31 Texas Senate districts. And so those, lines get redrawn based on population. And then, of course, for the U.S. House, for the U.S. Congress. And by the way, I know folks on this call are politically engaged. I don't want to insult your intelligence, but it is interesting. So think about that in the U.S. Congress, in the U.S. House, 435 members. I think they were increasing the size of the U.S. Congress till long about the 1920s, and they froze it at 435. And now those seats move around the country, right? And as some states grow, they gain seats. As states shrink, they lose them. And so every census, those congressional seats move around a little bit. California, in that process, added seats every census. Every decade, California added seats until the last census, and California broke even. And after that 2010 census, they did not gain or lose any congressional seats. And this time, for the first time ever, they're losing congressional seats. Texas is going to pick up probably 3. Florida's getting a couple. And I will just say this, y'all are business people and you operate on the free market. Of course, you want a predictable and a reasonable regulatory environment, but because of what you're doing, because of the Texas economic situation that you are creating and keeping going, people are moving here. So congressional seats are coming here. So we'll go from 36 members of the U.S. Congress, U.S. House based in Texas, probably to 38, but probably 39. So that's important. Now, of course, there are always rural, urban, suburban challenges in redistricting, but we're going to draw lines that are fair, they're constitutional, that follow the law, and just reflect the population of Texas. So it's going to be a fun process. I've been through it just once or so before. Scott, you were here for redistricting, weren't you, when you were on the Senate side?
I worked on it a couple of times, a mid-decade redistricting in the mid-90s when I worked in the Senate, and then obviously the 2000.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yes, we're going to get it done. And it takes a lot of time, and it's a contentious process, but it's good. I tell you this, many times we'll hear questions, occasionally we'll hear questions about this redistricting. Maybe we should go to an independent commission instead of having the legislature do it. But here's what other states have learned. When they take it away from the legislature and give it to an independent commission, it doesn't remove the politics, because those people appointed to the independent commission, they're all political people, right? But what it does is remove the accountability, and it also removes the transparency. Now it's done out in the open. We've been having hearings, virtual hearings, so folks can participate and see. And so I think the best way to draw the lines is let the people who are accountable to you, to the voters, draw those lines like any other bill. So we're going to get it done.
Yeah, that debate seems the party that's out of power always raises that debate on how that should be. And so
funny how that works. That's right.
It is. It's very funny how that works. Jumping back to Texas business climate, and I think a lot of those Californians obviously have moved to Texas, and our members build houses for them.
That's right. That's right.
Maybe to the chagrin of some legislators whose districts the hue may be changing a little bit.
Oh yeah.
At least those coming to Texas are coming here for a reason for the most part, and
that's right.
Are leaving a different political persuasion to move to Texas. And because we saw even this last legislative election in both the House and Senate, the partisan makeup stayed the same for the most part.
Scott, that's right. That's right. You remember 2018 was a real tough cycle for Republicans. The suburbs, which have always voted Republican, since they began to develop in the 50s and 60s and on. Man, 2018 was tough for Republicans in Texas and nationwide. But you're right, 2020, and I know we have Republicans and Democrats on this call as members, and I represent everybody, political people and non-political people. But as a conservative, I'm a Republican, and I like that party to be in control because I believe it's the most pro-freedom, pro-opportunity, pro-growth policy. But I'll say, 2020, it was looking like, Republicans were bracing themselves, and many of our Democratic friends were genuinely optimistic, in fact, confident that they were going to take the majority in the Texas House. And a lot of Republicans thought they were as well. So you're right, to see that and to see all the hundreds of millions of dollars come in from around the country in Texas House races against Republicans. You're right. And at the end of the day, one Republican incumbent lost, one Democrat incumbent lost. We just kind of broke even. So you're right. It was good. And so Texas is still in conservative control. It's not a Republican supermajority. We still have to work with the other side, and that's good. And Scott, this, most folks don't realize, but in Congress, in the U.S. Congress, they got that aisle down the middle, and Republicans sit on the right and Democrats sit on the left. And I guess it's that way in most legislative bodies in Western civilization. But I like the fact that in Texas, in the House and the Senate, yes, we have the aisle down the middle, but we sit all mixed up. I've got a Democrat behind me and a Republican next to me, and we don't hate each other. We work together. We listen to each other. Now, on the big important stuff that my district cares about, then we don't always agree. We don't always agree with our friends on the Democratic side, and the majority does rule, but we get along and we listen to each other. And I think that's one of the reasons Texas does have a strong climate for business and for opportunity and for everybody to thrive. So we want to keep it that way.
Well, and yes, as you know, that leads to compromise and getting things done, not the partisan division that we see in Washington, D.C.
Right.
Speaking of the business climate, I know COVID-19 liability protection is a huge issue this session. It's a governor's priority. I know you're supportive.
I am.
It's an issue for us. Can you give us a little insight on that and these companies that were trying to operate in these difficult times?
I sure can. Many states passed that legislation last year. I was in Georgia. I was in Atlanta, Georgia. When I say Atlanta, I mean Atlanta, Texas, but I was in Atlanta, Georgia for a conference, and they had passed that bill. I walked into the hotel, and there was a sign that said, pursuant to Georgia statute XYZ, owner's not responsible, and it explained, what the law did. Many states have passed that. Of course, as you know, your Texas legislature was not in session last year, but we are now And so, yes, we're going to pass strong common sense legislation that says folks don't have to worry about crazy lawsuits. My goodness, how could you possibly prove how somebody got sick or whether it was your fault or what you did or didn't do? So yes, that's important. Everybody needs that, right? Every business needs that. Individuals need that. So we can just do business and order our conduct. So yes, I think you're going to see strong liability protection for COVID-19 pass both houses and signed by the governor. I'm definitely for it, and I don't think there'll be much opposition to that, but we still got to get it done.
Well, let's hope so.
Yeah.
As you know, our industry, we want just a predictable business environment. We have to work with local governments. We work with state agencies, and our industry is highly regulated on the local, state, and national level. I want to thank you for your efforts to help us with that, whether it's development regulations, business regulations like we were talking about, environmental, other issues. You've always been a friend of the industry and understand understand what our members do to try to provide affordable housing for this growing state.
Amen. Amen.
So thank you for that. Other issues, Senator, that you're working on that we can help you with this session?
Well, as you mentioned, the budget, we're going to get that done. It's going to be a reasonable budget that lives within our means. And then ERCOT, doing something about that. There's plenty of fault to go around on this ERCOT deal, but the fault does not belong to families who are just trying to keep warm and trying to huddle up during those days. So that's got to be fixed. Again, last session, we made some real progress in public education, funding public education in a way that goes to the classroom, goes to those kids who need it most. And it's really worked. So we're going to make sure that's maintained. And one of the neat things we're doing there is teacher incentive pay. Now, we have great teachers. We want all our teachers to be the best, the sharpest, the best prepared, the best equipped. We also recognize that we have really good teachers and some teachers that really do even more and really hit the heights. And for those teachers, just like folks on your team who really excel, there ought to be a way to reward them, right, to even more. And so Longview ISD actually has been a leader on this. Dallas has done some innovative stuff, but with House Bill 3, we put some state funding in place so that every school district in Texas can develop a program with help from the teachers so we can really reward those. The way it is now, if I'm teaching school and I want to be able to make more money to provide for my family, at some point, the only way I can increase my income is to go into administration. Administrators are great. We're thankful for them. But wouldn't you like to have those best math teachers, best English, best science, best history teachers stay in the classroom and make real money? So Scott, I'm bragging on Longview. I was with the superintendent last night in Longview ISD this year. We're going to have a dozen teachers making over $100,000 a year. Isn't that something? Isn't that great?
That is
wonderful. And may their tribe increase. And so, and we put that out there. It encourages those teachers. And so that funding is going to be maintained. There was some talk that we should cut back on that. No, it's working. Our superintendents, some are still getting comfortable with it, but that's okay. Once we get this going and the teachers get a taste for it, it's going to be here to stay. In Texas, that's one area we're really leading the way on. And so we're very excited about that. Obviously, y'all need an educated workforce and you need folks who can buy those houses. And so it's good for all of us. We talked about redistricting, of course. And again, we're going to work to keep this free market system in place. We're not in the business of picking winners and losers and bailing out a particular company or anything else. That's not, y'all aren't looking for that. Like you, we want to have a predictable system so you know what the rules are, so you can make plans and make sure there's opportunity, man. And so some of these local governments are trying to do things in place, put things in place that may sound good with mandatory sick leave or raising up some kind of a local minimum wage. That sounds good, but we know that at the end of the day, those things cost jobs. Those things hurt the very people that they are supposed to be for. And y'all are stuck in the middle. So we want to make sure the state is putting a framework in place so that maybe more liberal progressive cities can't do stupid stuff that's going to mess with our employers. And, any employers, things like that. So that's going on. And we're just going to try to keep this system strong and make sure the government's not in your way. We believe in the American dream. We believe in opportunity. And so I know y'all do. That's what y'all do for a living. So we're thankful for you.
Well, thank you, Senator. We appreciate that. And thank you for your leadership on the education front. As you know, we were real involved with House Bill 3, career and technical education changes y'all made. I can brag about the Tyler District, Longview District have both done a bunch of great things in your district, building CTE centers. And we have school districts and community colleges and higher ed all over the state working with our industry and trying to provide a future workforce. So thank you for that. I know that has been a challenge during these times of COVID because of they have some space limitations, because unlike a lot of education that's gone online, you can't learn to frame a house or plumb a house or install electrical system or HVAC remotely necessarily. You need hands-on work. So those things are still going on. And so we continue to work on that. But I want to thank you for joining us today. Our industry really appreciates all you do for this not very high paid job as a state legislator. It is definitely a commitment to service, and the people in Northeast Texas are blessed to have you as a state senator, and we appreciate our long friendship. So thank you for joining us, Senator. I know you got work to do. I'll let you get back to it.
Scott, I'm thankful for you. And of course, you and I go way back, and many of your members I've known since before I was in politics, and gotten to know so many more. And thanks for what y'all do. You know, we talk about the American dream and opportunity, but I was talking to Dr. Odom on our team, and you know, the American dream, what's the heart of the American dream? It's home ownership, right? And that's what y'all do. And it's real, and you make it real for tens of thousands of Texas families every year. And thank you for putting up with all you have to put up with to do it. We want to make sure you have the tools. The government's not in your way. And again, I look forward to seeing you back home. Y'all do so much community stuff. I know I'm not going to get to see some of you down here later in the session, I think, and also back home. So let us hear from you. Thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you, Senator. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, that was a great conversation. As you can see, we have a real friend in the industry and Senator Hughes. So now we have a message from our next sponsor, Structure Home Warranty. Okay. Well, that was a great conversation with Senator Hughes. As we talked about, sure I'm not on mute here. As we talked about with the Senator, burdensome regulations and fees, adequate infrastructure, workforce training, and the unintended consequences of otherwise well-meaning legislation are a few of the areas in which the residential construction industry is impacted by the decision makers of policymakers at the local, state, and national level. Representing our 10,000 members, whether they be single family home builders, remodelers, multifamily builders and operators, developers, and our thousands of associate members from suppliers to lenders to the affiliated trades, they're all affected by our industry. And, you know, the 2020 was a year of uncertainty for everyone in this country dealing with the pandemic. But certainly we had our challenges, and getting deemed essential was crucial to maintaining the ability of our members and whether they be associates, builders, or anyone in between, to provide housing for Texans. As the state's population continues to grow, we talked about that. These folks from California and all over the country moving to Texas, they're moving here because of the affordability of housing, and they're moving here because there are jobs available. And so we have to work to make sure that Texas continues to maintain its place to provide for that increased growth. That demand for housing, that demand for infrastructure, a demand for a workforce to meet that growth have to be carefully considered by policymakers. And it is what we engage in at the Capitol and other decision makers to try to make sure that those decisions consider the impact we have on housing going forward. As we move forward, reasonable regulation and proven market-driven approaches will be an essential part in maintaining the housing industry as the leading economic driver of this state. As this legislative session is evolving, our Government Relations Committee has identified our legislative priorities, and those include, first and foremost, maybe do no harm, protect the numerous gains from the last several sessions that we've had. The last few sessions, we've seen amazing legislative success in this legislative environment. Just as a disclaimer, and the senator alluded to this, it is going to be a challenge getting bills passed. While we have an aggressive agenda and we'll be pushing those, the reality is that the pace of legislative action is much slower. And so getting a lot of this stuff accomplished is going to be difficult, to say the least. But that being said, the process is set up to kill bills, not pass bills, and maybe this session, not maybe, for sure, more than ever, that's going to be the case this session. And so some of these big gains that we got passed in the last session that were passed by the legislature, we have to maintain those. Those include the prohibition on favoring certain building code certain code-approved building products over others, the products mandates legislation for last session, as well as the prohibition on both mandatory fire sprinklers and linkage fees. We need to make sure that those prohibitions continue. We also need to make sure that legislation that defines fair building permit fee calculations remains in place, and the significant savings that builders and developers saw from our rollback in the ag exemption last session continues. We're also going to be opposing any efforts to remove the sales tax exemption on construction labor and fighting against any new taxes or fees on residential construction and development. There are those in the legislature that know how well our industry is doing on both the local and state level and see us as a potential golden goose. And we need to make sure that the additional taxes and fees are not placed on our industry that ultimately only raise the cost of housing. It's also important that moving forward, even though the governor's announcement in reopening the state, that we continue to keep our industry designated as an essential service throughout the remainder of the pandemic, and make sure that in any future disaster going forward, that our industry maintains that designation. The pandemic has shown that the ability of our members to provide housing and repair and build housing during the pandemic can be done safely, as long as the safety protocols are followed, but that people demand that the work that our members do continues, and we have to make sure that our members are able to do that. We also need to clarify some gains in the development and plat review process. We're working on that. We're also pursuing some offensive legislation. One of the things, and we've already seen bills filed in the House and Senate, is to keep allow third-party inspections to continue and keep the building permit inspection process productive during disasters. We're going to be working on that. We're also working on possible clarifications and statutory cleanups to both the lien statute and our right to cure legislation in the Residential Construction Liability Act, or RECLA. We're also exploring alternative compliance paths to the Energy Code and are into some discussions on some legislative changes there. Additionally, we are supporting legislation that will prohibit, Senator Hughes mentioned this, certain local regulation of employment practices, whether that be paid sick leave or local government imposed minimum wage or other things. We think those are best resolved on the state or national level, and there needs to be statewide application of that. So we're going to be working on that legislation. And we're also working on an issue that has been an issue for a number of years, but the pandemic has only highlighted. We're part of a coalition on more broadband access across the state. As our kids are going to school at home, people are trying to work from home. Areas of the state, and it's not just a rural issue, it's a suburban and urban issue. We need to have more broadband access to all Texans. We also talked about liability protections for businesses operating during the pandemic. We are part of that, as well as tort reform efforts against skyrocketing trucking accident litigation. Many, especially our associate members who are supplying materials and other goods, are finding themselves subject to some of this frivolous litigation. And so we're working with that coalition as well. For our multifamily tax credit folks, we're working on legislation for better consistency across the state for ad valorem tax appraisals for low-income housing tax projects, as well as other legislation affecting landlord-tenant and evictions and other issues affecting our multifamily members. We mentioned providing additional CTE workforce reforms and to enhance the funding for those programs at both the public school level as well as higher ed, because the demand for labor has only been, it's only increased during our continuing robust housing economy, and now the winter storm has shown that as well, and the need of plumbers and other folks. We're also working on it consistently, as we do every session, on development fee calculations and building permit timelines. That's an issue in certain areas of the state that continues to be a challenge. It ties in somewhat with the third-party inspections during a disaster, but also during normal times that we hope we are returning to soon, that there is a certainty as well as a consistency in both the calculation of the fees and the timelines involved. As always, our municipal utility districts and other special districts are very important to our industry. In many areas of the state, in the unincorporated areas and other areas, special districts serve as a way to provide utility infrastructure, and many of the housing neighborhoods that are getting built across the state could not happen with the ability of MUDs and other special districts to provide that infrastructure financing. And so we're always involved in that issue. Also, issues related to homeowner associations and property owner associations are of utmost importance to our builders and developers, so that they can maintain the character, vision, and property values of these communities that are in such great demand across the state. An issue that continues to be at the forefront, that we continue to get a lot of calls and conversations, is about the spike in lumber, and we are seeing it now in other materials. That's continued to be an issue. There's limitations as to what the Texas legislature can do, but it is an issue of great importance, and one that we're working with NHB as well as industry partners trying to address. And finally, last session was dominated by the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey. Now it's Winter Storm Uri, or the snowpocalypse, or Snowvid, or whatever you want to call it. It was something that none of us predicted, but now it is something that is at the front of the mind of almost all of the legislators, because so many of their constituents are having to deal with not only the power outages, but the resulting damage, whether they be from fire sprinklers or other plumbing leaks or other damage that occurred. And so rebuilding from a disaster is still going to be a major issue for our industry, and one that we're going to be engaged. I mentioned the bill filing deadline is coming up next week. And so that timing is good, because when we come in April, we will have, prior to April, we will be supplying to the local HBAs and your Rally Day leaders lists of the bills that we're both supporting and those of great concern. So look for that. We'll be getting that out very soon. We are approaching our 1 hour, but I have to say again, today would not be possible without our sponsors. I want to thank them. Our presenting sponsors: Ferguson Enterprises, Great American Insurance, James Hardie Building Products, and Structured Home Warranty. You saw those commercials from them. I want to thank them. But we also have some other sponsors that you can see up on the screen. Our signature sponsor, Atmos Energy, and Permapeer Foundation Repair of Texas. We also have a patron sponsor, Fox Energy Specialists, and our friend sponsor, McCoy's Building Supply and Tropicana Homes. So want to thank once again all of those sponsors. I also want to remind all of you to register for the April 13 meetings with elected officials. The Capitol access is somewhat limited. Many of the offices are not open to in-person meetings. They're only meeting via Zoom. Other offices are open, but they are not hosting large groups such as ours. And so the way we are going to do the April 13 Rally Day in Austin is we're going to be headquartered at the Hyatt Regency, just south of the river, and our local HBAs, as I mentioned earlier, are going to be scheduling meetings with those legislators that want to come over in person. We will have large rooms available so everyone can space out safely with all safety protocols, and other meetings are being scheduled via Zoom, both during that time and earlier. I know some of the local associations are also scheduling lunches and other events with their delegations. So it's going to, just bear with us. It's going to be a little different than years gone by, but we're going to get through. Also, make sure you register for the TAB Winter Committee and Board meetings that are going to be April 14th and 15th at the Hyatt in downtown Austin after Rally Day. And finally, I want to thank Governor Abbott for his kind words, Senator Hughes, TAB President Susan Wright, As I told the first meeting of the Women's Council, the Professional Women Buildings Council last week, our association may be slow learners. It took us 75 years to get a female president, but I am very glad we have one. I know she will not be the last. Our GRC, Government Relations Chairman Don Allen, for your work in leading what is a challenging session. But most importantly, I want to say thank you to all of you who are listening today or watching today on this Zoom call. Your involvement makes a difference. And so I know things are a little different this session, or a lot different, but you being engaged is going to be the difference between our success and not in these remaining 3 months of the session. As Senator Hughes pointed out, they're just now getting going. It's amazing. We're 40 or 50 days into the session. There's only about 90 days left, but all of the work is going to be done or not in these 90 days. And so we're going to need all of you to be engaged. So with that, President Don, any comments? Yes, ma'am.
Well, I thought it was great. I thought we learned a lot. Our attendees were great, the participation today. On that note, we did have somebody in the link section ask about how to register for what's coming in April. And so you might, if somebody can tell them the process to get there. I know it's local, but also just for the regular meetings that we're having.
Yes, you can register for our TAB meetings on our TAB website. So if you go to texasbuilders.org, right there on that front page, there's a link and our members can register. Our Rally Day attendees, that is coordinated through our local HBAs. So they have numbers on their number of attendees so they can work with us on getting the appropriate space. So if you want to attend just Rally Day, you can work with your local HBA, but for attending the TAB meetings, you can go to the TAB website. There was a question, I think, about when registration is open. I believe that the registration emails come out next week, actually. So look for that in coming weeks. So with that, we're looking at 1 hour exactly, and we promised to keep this to an hour. I hope everyone appreciated this first virtual briefing. As someone that's been doing this for 25 years, this is not my preferred way to do it. I like pressing the flesh and seeing everyone, but I guess we are having to adjust and do the best we can. So thank you for your patience in participating. So with that, I'll let you, Susan and Don, sign off, and I look forward to seeing all of you next month here in Austin.
Great. Don, you have any comments?
No, great meeting. Thanks to staff for setting this up, and thanks for all the for Governor Abbott and Senator Hughes for participating. That was great.
Great. And I'll just finish by thanking all the attendees, and hopefully you'll realize how much we do. If you haven't been on one of these, you'll get a feel for our engagement, and we'll continue to participate. But thank you for being here today.